Welcome to episode 26 of the Exit Philosophy podcast, coming to you on Tuesday, October the 24th, one day later than usual. And that's because Griff and I did a special October the 23rd, Monday edition of the podcast to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Joe Carter's walk-off home run that won the Blue Jays the 1993 World Series. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts, or at youtube.com/exit philosophy. We do have a video component here to the show. And before we kick today's episode off, an opportunity to remind you that griffsthepitch.com is where you can get all of Griff's work, multiple weekly MLB baseball columns. The Exit Philosophy podcast is posted to griffsthepitch.com, and Griff also has conversations with some of the game's greats, current and former Blue Jays and former Montreal Expos. And we are now, Griff.
And there will be a World Series preview column on Thursday with the series about to start.
Right. So as we sit here right now, timing is always everything. Texas has just beaten the Houston Astros in a road series, a full-on 7-game road team won each game series, 4-3, and the Philadelphia Phillies and Arizona Diamondbacks will play Game 7 of the National League Championship Series tonight. I don't know why it's cold in the apartment, Griff. If you're watching on YouTube, I've got my autumn jacket on. So it's that time of year to talk a little playoffs and to talk about where the Toronto Blue Jays go next. Somebody told me it's time to move forward. It's time to focus on the future. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think that the best idea going into the offseason for the Blue Jays front office is to just make a list, check it twice. And the positions that are available on that list would be DH, obviously, with Brandon Belt not coming back. Second base, I mean, they've got 3 or 4 guys, including the 15 minutes of fame, Davis Schneider, and second base needs to be addressed. They need one outfield spot if they're going to go with George Springer, who's still on that long-term deal. And if Dalton Varsho moves to center field, they need a hard-hitting left fielder. And can anyone spell Lourdes Gurriel? They need a third baseman because I don't think there's any way they're going to spend the money on Matt Chapman that would need to be spent, because looking at their payroll from this year, and Mark Shapiro said that it's going to be pretty consistent to what it was, and it was $210 million. You look at the guaranteed contracts, the estimates of arbitration settlement for the returning players, and the players that are pre-arbitration, and it adds up to about 185. So they got 25 million if they want to equal last year's payroll. And that's flexible because you can always get rid of some guys that are making too much for what they contribute. So it's flexible, but basically you start with 25 million that they have to spend to fill those positions, unless they go internal and maybe have an Aurelvis Martinez who's not ready if the Blue Jays want to win 90-something games.
So you're telling me my dream of Cody Bellinger being a Blue Jay is not going to come true? No,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if they do that, they're going to have to peel back somewhere else, maybe in the bullpen. I mean, we discussed the $9 million that is the maximum that Chad Green could be getting, and all the permutations and combinations of a convoluted contract that he signed while he was recovering from his surgery, but he bounced back fine. And maybe you can explain it. You explained it to me.
Yeah. So, okay. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping our thoughts organized here, because I do have some thoughts on the outfield.
Yeah.
Cody Bellinger's my dream signing. He can also play a little.
It'd be a great signing.
He can also play a little bit of first base and play it well, so that, the 3.5 to 6 times a week that they seem to want to DH Vladdy, Cody Bellinger could play first base, right? So he can play center field and he can play first base, and he can do both well. He's a left-handed hitter. That's the dream signing. I doubt. People are all gonna, people are gonna say, well, how can you give Cody Bellinger $150 million for the next 6 years when you haven't even addressed Vlad and Bo yet? And then that leads to bigger conversations about what exactly it is you believe about Vlad. And I think that 2024 is going to determine a lot about what you believe about Vlad and how long you want to extend him out, etc. So, if you can get Cody Bellinger into the fold, I think you kick the other cans down the road and worry about it. I don't necessarily think Cody Bellinger's realistic. So I'm going to throw another idea out, and it does not involve Kevin Kiermaier returning. I think we all agree that Dalton Varsho is playing center field for this team when right-handed pitchers start against the Blue Jays. The majority of starting pitchers are right-handed. So we know that. So the strong side of the platoon, as they would say, Dalton Varsho is going to play center field. We know that George Springer is in right field, and we'll talk about George Springer in just a little bit. You're promoting a Lourdes Gurriel Jr. type. I'm down for that. They need a corner outfielder who can play left field with more of a bat. So here's my proposition for the fourth outfielder, Griff.
Yep.
You're not losing any defense at all, and you're getting a right-handed bat who's got power against left-handed pitchers, therefore can start against left-handed starters, can replace Dalton Varsho late in games against tough left-handed relievers, or if you have a lead, can join Varsho in the outfield. He moves out to center field. Varsho moves to left for late-game defensive replacements. I'm calling on, because he had more than 20 home runs this year for the Twins, I'm saying go and get Michael A. Taylor.
That works. But, I think from the Twins roster that was pretty good, but they're a medium market, and they have Edouard Julien. My choice there from the Twins roster would be a free agent, Jorge Polanco. And if he could play second base, he's a switch hitter. And I don't think they're going to platoon Dalton Varsho. If he moves to center field, he's a center fielder against all pitchers. That's
is he batting 10th against lefties then?
He can bunt.
Can he?
Bunt every time. But he gets a lot of bunt hits against left-handers. But if Polanco was signed and played second base, then you would have to think about, I think you would have to think about moving George Springer and telling him you're no longer our leadoff hitter, because, his abilities as a hitter and a leadoff hitter need to be addressed as they were when he went 0 for 35 and he was dropped down to the 5-6, somewhere in there. I think that would be the ultimate for the Blue Jays lineup next season, rather than have him leading off every game.
Okay, so I'm just keeping things organized. We got to come back to Chad Green because that's on the table, but we'll do that when we talk pitching. George Springer. And when I say this, I want to be clear, because everything is so black and white out there that, if you're saying this, it's you believe 100% I'm not saying that they should not have signed George Springer. I'm not saying the contract is a failure. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I think it's important with Ryu and with Springer, the ability to lure big name free agents to Toronto has been important. And Springer, when healthy, has been very good for the Blue Jays, especially the first 2 seasons he was here. There is, though, a component of these long-term, big expense contracts given out to guys who are about age 30, Griff, that in a perfect world, or even in a not so perfect world, in an ideal world, those contracts are paid off with some team success in the early part of the deal, or early parts of those deals.
Agreed.
And we're now at the point with George Springer, the wear and tear is adding up. He has missed time with the Blue Jays over the first half of this contract. He was not nearly as good a hitter in 2023 as he was in 21 and 22, and in his time with Houston. I think we're starting to see some regression now, such that you have a massive contract on the books that isn't anywhere close to expiring for a player who, just based on the actuarial table, is declining. And that can complicate things, especially when he had carved out a reputation elsewhere as a leadoff hitter and as a core component of your team's offense. Maybe he can be that again, but he's going to have to go out there and show that he can be that again. Otherwise, you got to talk to him, Griff. And I think you were starting to go down this track and say, Georgie, you can't be on base 31.5% of the time and expect to lead off for this team. In the very same way that Bo Bichette got moved out of the 2-hole in the summer of 2022 for the Blue Jays when he was on base less than 30% of the time. And I know that improved with his hot finish to that season, but you can't have George Springer leading off just because George Springer's a leadoff hitter or has been in the past. He's got to produce to maintain that spot in the lineup.
Right. And I think that those long-term contracts, 7+ years for mega dollars, I think it's makes more sense when that player has been your own player from the time he signed to the time he reached the major leagues. And so you're rewarding him for what he's already done in terms of making it equitable when he was being paid under $1 million for his first 3 seasons and then through the ARB years. And I think that it's easier to explain those contracts than to bring a guy in who's had his best years somewhere else, and then you're paying him for the downside and the tail end of his career, like George Springer. And he can still be productive. He was healthier probably in 2023 than he had been in previous Blue Jays seasons. And he played a decent right field. Center field was not his best position at this stage of his career. Right field, he can get by. But I agree with you that if opening day 24 sees him batting leadoff, then I think that it's going to be a very difficult lineup to expect to produce enough to contend.
Well, I'll just come back to a theme that everybody finally arrived at with this franchise after the season, which is communication. And I don't think you bring George Springer into your office if you're John Schneider on May the 1st, if he's got a 550 OPS with a 270 on base, and say, George, how do you feel about dropping to 5 or 6? It's, George, we got to talk, and this is where we're at, and this is what is best for the team, and therefore this is what is best for you, and we're moving you down in the lineup. I'm not going to freak out, Griff, if Springer's the leadoff hitter on opening day, because I just feel that he will be. But if they can't move off of that quickly, if it's not working, then it'll be a problem. But they just simply need to communicate with the player. They don't owe him anything other than the massive paychecks he's drawing. His reputation precedes him, but does not require him to maintain his spot in the order if he's not producing.
When you're getting that much money for that many years down the line, you can get over it. You can get over being called in the office and saying, okay, this is your new role. But I think it's important that they do that early enough where they can go out and look at the market, either in trade or free agency, and look for a player who fits a leadoff role or a second in the order role, someone at the top of the order, rather than saying, we've got our leadoff hitter, so let's focus on somebody who can hit 5th, 6th, or 7th and drive in some runs. I think it's important that they have that flexibility moving into the offseason. Further to the communication aspect, and we're bouncing around in this situation, but all Blue Jays, is they have to communicate. And maybe Mark Shapiro was alluding to that with the Alek Manoah situation. Like, there clearly was a failure to communicate. And whether it was the fault of an immature 25-year-old or the offseason that created the monster that ended up being shipped down to the complex and then brought up while the 6-man rotation and then being optioned again? Was he aware of any of that? And maybe that's the communication that needs to improve, is letting people in the clubhouse, players, know in advance what the plans are for them. And I know things could change. Somebody could have got injured and Manoah could have stayed. Hyunjin Ryu could have not produced the way he did coming back from Tommy John surgery, and then they would have needed Manoah. But at least to have these players aware that there is a possibility and what the possibilities are. Maybe that's what Mark Shapiro was referring to when he said that communications has to improve.
Yeah, the Manoah thing is fascinating on a lot of levels to me, Griff, and I touched on it as we discussed it, but touched on it at the time it was happening. And I still firmly believe, like, based on performance, what happened with Alek Manoah over the course of the season was justified. The difference is, of course, and this matters, is that he was awesome in his rookie year after he was called up in late May of 2021, and then he was a top 3 Cy Young finalist in 2022. So that changes the game a little bit. But based strictly on his 2023 performance, Alek Manoah as a young pitcher with options, the decisions that were made to take him out of the starting rotation were wholly and fully justifiable. And you and I both advocated back in late May, and it ended up happening, that Manoah not go to Buffalo, but go back to the complex in Florida. I took some heat on Twitter for suggesting that he just needs to get out on the golf course and sort of unwind a little bit. Why you saying you should go on vacation to Florida? And I'm like, no, you're working at the lab. You're sitting down with the sports psychologists. You're looking over your delivery and where there may be some hiccups there, and you're working on some things, but you're also allowed at 2 p.m. to get the hell away after a 5-hour workday, clear your head a little bit. I didn't have a problem with that. You could also have justified sending him out the way that they did in August, just based on performance. So, but again, what we don't know, and the blanks that ultimately need to be filled in here, was how it all went down from a communication perspective, number one. And number two, based on number one, is, can this be salvaged? Is Alek Manoah going to show up in Dunedin around Valentine's Day ready to compete to be the 5th starter in this stacked rotation? Or is this somehow, some way irreparably broken? And for all the ways that I've crapped on the front office, Griff, I'm not entirely sure the extent to which this is the front office's fault. I mean, Alek Manoah, if he's been done wrong by, that's a problem. But Alek Manoah also needs to come into camp and be a better pitcher in 2024 to justify his spot on the roster.
I think the entire way of handling pitchers in season has changed. It changed with COVID in 2020 when they had the camp in Rochester and there were no minor leagues being played. All the good prospects went to Rochester to an alternate site and were worked with individually. And guys came out of that summer better than if they had gone to Bluefield or somewhere else. They came out of there knowing more about themselves and about how to pitch than they would have going to the lower levels of the minor leagues. And now the minor leagues are down to 4 teams in each farm system. And so the fact of Manoah being sent to the complex was easy to understand because of the 2020 experience. They were able to do hands-on. You don't need to see in Buffalo his walks and innings pitched and his strikeouts, because you're pitching against AAA hitters, and we've all seen guys come up and fail miserably with great success at AAA, then come to the major league. So the fact that he originally was sent down to the complex, and as you pointed out, all the things that were available to him down there, I think that was never a surprise. And then when he came back up with all that knowledge and all that improvement in terms of not necessarily the stuff on the mound in a game, but the improvement in him as an understanding pitcher of what needs to be done, it was an easy call to send him to Buffalo. And then when he didn't report, that's where you wonder about the communications. He didn't report. He hasn't been made available. The Blue Jays keep saying, well, we'd like you to talk to John Schneider. Is he available? No, he's not available. Would like you to talk to Alek Manoah. Is he available? No, he's not available. So we don't really know the nuts and bolts of the problems that are involved, but we can make educated guesses is what we're doing here. But I do believe that the media, the state-controlled media, the Blue Jays-controlled media made more of an issue of Alek Manoah not reporting than would be the repercussion when he shows up at spring training next year. I think that the clubhouse looked at that because it's a players association, a players union thing, and they're all members of the union. I don't think they look at, oh, he quit on us. I don't think any players look at it like that. I think they go, I wonder what happened. Let's give him a chance. Let's see what it is. Not everybody's in that clubhouse is a big fan of the front office. And I think when they need to have him show up earlier than Valentine's Day. They need him to go over there and work out at the complex. So I'm sure they'll do that. But I don't see that as a lost cause moving forward to 2024. And they're going to need one starter. He's an option. I mean, he could go to Buffalo to start the season, likely. Or they could trade him, but nobody wants to give you anything for a pitcher like that who's had those problems without any understanding of what they were.
Yeah, my reference was not to are there problems between him and his teammates. It's
more, I understand, but there are public perceptions of that.
Right? Do he and his people want to deal with the Blue Jays anymore? And I have this like fence sitting approach to this where I see it as, okay, if there was some miscommunication or poor communication, that needs to be dealt with communication.
Right.
But Alek Manoah
Shapiro is referring to.
Right. But Alek Manoah's 2021 and 2022 accomplishments don't give him carte blanche to be as bad as he was in 2023 and expect to maintain his spot in the starting rotation and even on the 26-man roster. Like, I can actually see both sides.
Right, but it's difficult to stop an avalanche. I mean, once that starts down the slope, you can't just put up a fence and stop it. It's more than that. And the problems of Alek Manoah in the summer of 23 was an avalanche.
Without question. And the worst case scenario, Griff, would be for both sides coming to some conclusion that a trade is the best option. The Blue Jays getting what ultimately would be considered an inadequate return, only to watch Alek Manoah turn back into his 2021-2022 self for his new team. I mean, that would be a horrible waste of a first-round draft pick who succeeded significantly and probably beyond expectation so early at the major league level. So they got to do this dance in whatever way they need to do it to try to smooth this situation over.
Absolutely right. And the maturing process obviously is not complete at 25 years old, but he improved so much going to Cape Cod League, he admits. Then he went from Cape Cod League to West Virginia and dominated. Then he went to the Blue Jays farm system and dominated, earned a spot in the big leagues. 21 was great. 22 was an all-star and had an in-game conversation with John Smoltz in the all-star game. And like, there is talent there. There is an ability that you can't just let go for nothing because of this problem that happened in 2023. They need to play this out. He's only 25 years old, and the Blue Jays are going to need one starter. And we've talked about it off air. There's always, you can be guaranteed that one of the top four starters is going to be injured, which didn't happen in 23, but is guaranteed to happen in 24, because you just don't go 2 years with 4 guys making 30+ starts.
Right. And so Manoah is going to be in that conversation. Bowden Francis probably be in that conversation. Ricky Tiedemann, who's down in the Arizona Fall League right now, is probably their top pitching prospect. The problem Ricky had was that he had the biceps inflammation that cost him 3 months of his spring summer. He did come back in August. He did end up with a promotion to AAA. He did finish strong. As I said, he's in the AFL. So he's a young pitcher with a bright future, but there's still more seasoning there, Griff, before we can just sit here and say, well, he's going to be a huge factor in 2024.
Yeah, and I think Ricky Tiedemann, I mean, we talked earlier about if you're going to go deep into the playoffs, if you're going to go to the playoffs, you need someone from your system unexpected to step up. And he's not unexpected, but he's in the Arizona Fall League. He's dominating there. He's got a fastball 96, 90, 95, 96, 97. He's got a slider, sweeper. I hate sweeper, but slider. And he's working on a changeup, which is apparently going very well in the AFL. And so I look at Ricky Tiedemann as a surefire thing for some time during the 24 season, whether it's because of injury, whether it's because of his development. But there's a guy that has immense talent, could come in, fill in the bullpen. And so you don't need to rely on Alek Manoah or Bowden Francis. Bowden Francis has proved to be very serviceable in a long relief role, and he has had success as a minor league starter, so there's another option. So it's not a desperate situation with Ryu moving on, and I think there are options moving forward into 24.
Yeah, and we do not have to, with all due respect, we do not have to utter the name Thomas Hatch as an option ever again. Wow. Thank God. That felt like a half decade. Oh yeah, no, Thomas Hatch is down there in Buffalo. It's going to be all good. He'll come in. Their bullpen is essentially set up, Griff. I mean, Romano, Meza, Jimmy Garcia, his option vested late in the season, so he'll be back for a third year, barring a trade. Genesis Cabrera, Eric Swanson, and then you got some question marks. Is Trevor Richards' time in Toronto done? Where did Zach Pop go?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah.
And why did Zach Pop go? Adam Simber, Nate Pearson, whose next documentary on Sportsnet is going to be, can Nate Pearson throw 110? And it won't be miles per hour. It's career big league innings. And I don't mean to be rude, although I just was, but like, he's not a prospect anymore, friends. He isn't. Like, he can throw 101 miles per hour, but so can every other reliever in the league. You got to have some movement. You've got to have the pitch, the alternative, the breaking ball, whatever that keeps hitters off balance. Everybody can hit 101 if it's straight and they know it's coming.
Yeah, I remember spring training when Nate Pearson was one of the top 10 prospects in all of baseball. And spring training was a must travel. When he went on the road to pitch, the entire press corps went, because you wanted to see this guy throw 98, 99, and maybe occasionally hit 100. Now everybody's doing that. And I know that people say, well, they're measuring it out of the hand and not when it crosses the plate like they used to. But the bottom line is, even measuring it out of the hand, he's still only 97, 98, a lot of times sitting at 96. So people have blown by Nate Pearson, and he needs to do something special at spring training next year.
But also, like, if you throw 102, if you top out 102, why are you obsessing or even talking publicly about maybe getting to 104 or 105 or more? Like, why don't you refine your breaking ball, your off-speed stuff, so that you can pitch? I don't care how hard you can throw a ball through a wall. That's not what baseball is. So I don't know. It just feels like the ship there has. It may still be in port, but the sail is up, Griff.
That reminds me of my first time I met Dwayne Ward when I was covering in 95, and he was coming off injury. He went over to the Carpenter Complex for the Phillies to pitch an exhibition 2 innings, and it was a minor league game. And so we drove over and dutifully watched him throw. And he was like, Dwayne Ward should be mid-90s. And he was throwing like 87. Yes. And so he came off and we were all waiting to talk to him. And Ward blew by us, pushed by us, got into his car, spun gravel, and left the parking lot. And I wrote in my column that he pulled out of the parking lot faster than his best fastball. And he didn't talk to me for the first 2 months of the 95 season. I was a new kid on the block. Kid. And he just wouldn't talk to me. But now it's all right. We're good friends now. But like at some point, people blow by you. And if you don't keep up, or if you don't, in Nate Pearson's case, if you don't adapt or adjust, you're no longer a prospect.
Yeah. Smile about it now. And I certainly never said it to his face, but I remember when Liam Hendriks was pitching for the Blue Jays in 14 and 15, and I'd sit up there in the press box, and I always used to try to get somebody laughing. So I'd walk over to Gregor Chisholm and I say, 399 feet's coming back out, because there was a period of time there where Liam Hendriks was making some starts, and there were a lot of fly balls to dead center field that were caught on the with Pillar's ass backed up against the wall in center field at 399 feet. And that, when I watched Pearson pitch, Griff, there were just a lot of deep outs. Like, when he wasn't actually clogging the bases and giving up runners. I would slagging on him, but maybe there's a future there. I mean, obviously he's got the velocity and theoretically has the stuff, but if he doesn't put it together in spring training, he doesn't necessarily make this team. And I think it's almost time to move on. And that leads us to Chad Green, who's got this really interesting constructed contract where the Blue Jays will enter early November post World Series with the ability to either exercise or decline a team option on Chad Green, who they signed as he was working back from Tommy John surgery, the ex-Yankee. And of course, Green returned in September to the Blue Jays and pitched for them down the stretch and in the playoffs. But they can either exercise or decline a 3-year, $27 million team option. So 3 at 9 per year. If they decline that, Chad Green has a player option for 1 year at $6.25 million. If Green declines that, the Blue Jays then have a team option at 2 years and $21 million. So a 10.5 AAV. I don't have it in front of me whether that's like 8 and 13.5 or whether it's straight up 10.5 to get to 21.
Yeah, the 27 was 999. So I'm assuming that
right, probably 10.5. So, and then if they decline that option, Green becomes a free agent. I have to think, Griff, that somewhere in that sandwich of team and player options is where this thing moves. Because I don't know if Chad Green, if the Jays decline 3 and 27, which I think they should, because how many relievers get 3-year contracts at Green's age with his injury history? I could see Green going, if I decline 1 and 6.25, are the Jays going to pick up 2 and 21? Are they going to give me 8 figures over the next 2 years each to pitch for them, given my history? Maybe I got to go with 1 and 6.25, because can I get 6.25 or better on a 1-year deal as a free agent? This is a really, the way this is structured, I know it's Chad Green, it's middle to late leverage relief, but this is a fascinating decision that both sides need to make here based on the way the contract's constructed.
Yeah, I don't think that the Blue Jays would have constructed that contract if they didn't intend on him pitching for the team in 2024. I think it's a possibility because he came back from his injury. He worked his way. And as you said, he came in with runners on base in the minor leagues and was able to do that. and came back to the major leagues and performed. He performed in the period of time that he was given the opportunity. So he showed that he was healthy coming back from surgery. And therefore, I don't think they would have constructed the contract that way if they didn't intend on having at least some part of it take hold. Now, maybe you're right. Maybe they'll decline the 27, although I think there's a chance they take it. 9, 9, and 9 for the next 3 years, because if you go 6.5 and count on him betting on himself, if he doesn't, then you lose him and all of that work in putting that contract in. And I'm just suggesting that if they go to all the effort of making that contract, they want him here in some capacity over at least 1, maybe 3 years. And so I think he will be in that bullpen. We're talking about filling out the bullpen. Now that only leaves, if Chad Green is there for 1, 2, or 3 years, in 24, you're looking at 2 spots, maybe maximum available in the bullpen, unless Adam Simber is not tendered, which is, I think, is going to happen. And then what do they do with Trevor Richards and Zach Pop?
You think Simber is going to be tendered or not?
Not going to be.
No.
Yeah.
And I think Trevor Richards, the way that season ended for him, Griff, I think you've got to seriously consider non-tendering him.
Yeah, I think there's younger pitchers coming up who do the same thing or on the market. Any general manager who tries to put together their bullpen before the new year is playing a mug's game. I mean, there's so many guys out there looking for jobs that throw hard, that can fill the 5th, 6th, or 7th inning when necessary, that you don't need to make that a priority until the new year.
So, I mean, we're going to continue to go weekly here and continue to discuss these topics and fill in the blanks as they go along. As far as I'm concerned, Griff, and it starts with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., to get from the 89 wins that they had, or they topped out in this post-2017 Shapiro-Atkins era so far at 92 in 2022, to get from the 89, 90, 91, 92 range to 95, 96, which then I think gets you into a more realistic conversation about winning the division. You've got to have internal improvement from your best players. Because I'm not looking at a trade market, because of course in a trade you're giving up to get. I'm not looking at a trade market or a free agent market that strikes me as one that is going to completely improve and overhaul this team. And they've got a lot of holes in their batting lineup right now. They got to get better at second base. They got to get better at third base. They need a corner outfielder with some pop. Those are 3. I would argue that there's even 4 spots in a 9-man order that need to get considerably better. And you can cover some of your issues if your best players perform to their best more nights than not. And it starts for me with Vlad. He needs to be a lot better in 2024 if this team wants to get to or is to get where it wants to go. And if this front office is to get a 10th year. It's incumbent on Vlad. Starts with him. There are others, but it starts with Vlad improving, because I just don't see a lot of external options coming in and creating 6 or 7 more wins to get them into the mid to high 90s range of W's. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, it was, the word frustration is probably uppermost in most Blue Jays fans' mind, is watching the entire month of September as they're trying to create a wild card position for themselves, the Blue Jays, and then watching in the 2 games, 2 losses in Minneapolis, you need guys like Yordan Alvarez. You need guys like Kyle Schwarber, like Bryce Harper, somebody who steps in, Jose Altuve, somebody who steps into the box and you go, okay, there's no way they're going to get this guy out in this situation. And they come through as often as they fail. And you know, that baseball is a game of 70% failure, or 60 if you're just trying to reach base. But they need Vlad to be that guy. The Blue Jays need Vlad, or Bo didn't come through like he did in September the previous year. I think everybody was expecting, well, September is Bo's month. But when Bo and Vlad are not doing their thing, you notice the bullpen failures. You notice the bottom of the order failures. And I agree with you 100%, Scotty, is that they need Vlad with 2 years left before free agency to bet on himself in 2024, step up and earn himself the contract that everyone thought he would get within the Blue Jays organization moving forward for the next 10 years.
Yeah. And look, there's a conversation to be had about metrics and analytics and whether we're pro them or against them. I'm pro analytics. And I'm tired of the argument about analytics, because they exist in the sport and they should. The information is important. It's how you deploy it. It's how you communicate it, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say this. If it's August 2024 and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is hitting 260 with a 325 on base and a 107 or 108 OPS plus, which would mean that he's a 7 or 8% better hitter than the average in the league, and somebody trots out well, he's having a lot of bad luck because he's like 4th in hardest hit rate in baseball. I'm just not here for it. I'm not here for an argument that a guy who's hitting scorching ground balls right at infielders for 2 or 3 consecutive years is just the victim of bad luck. I'm not here for it. Star players have to produce. That's it. That's it. Going to free agency in a couple of years and saying, well, if you look at my hard hit ball rate, I'm one of the top in the league. I know I've led the league and grounded into double plays for the last 3 or 4 seasons, and I know that I hit a lot of balls hard. They're just right at people on the infield. That's not going to get you paid. Like, can we just please, there needs to be production. There needs to be production at the level that a guy like him is expected to produce. I know he's still a kid, and I know it's a lot to ask, and the world is, but he wants to be a $300+ million player, Griff. He's got to put the stats up. It's the bottom line. It's time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100% on the analytics portion and the hard hit balls. And I remember a series in Boston at Fenway where the Jays, this was when I was working with the Jays, and they hit like 25 balls hard, 95 miles an hour or more, and lost the game. Like, there were a bunch of singles off the Green Monster, and they lost the game. And you look at the postseason, and the postseason, you see the same teams, the same players. You understand what they are, who they are, and there's more base hits. There's more parachutes falling in than Normandy, and like, these are guys that have reached this level of the game, not by hitting the ball hard, the balls that they can drive, but by hitting the balls that are bastard pitches and lobbing them into left field or right field or center field. And that's how you win games. It's not your hard hit ball percentage. And that's what a lot of the Blue Jays seem to focus on, is I hit the ball, very hard. And like, we didn't win.
Yeah, so, like that's when Bo's at his best, when he's shooting the ball through the right side, second base, when he's shooting it down the first base line, willing to do that.
When his ass is in the dugout and he ropes one inside the first base line and gets a double out of it. That's it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you reach base. Just reach base and get it done. I mean, that's the bottom line here. Like, it's not. And you know what? This notion, Griff, that baseball's hard. Like, I see that on Twitter, or people say baseball's hard. You know what? Baseball's also hard for Bryce Harper. Baseball's also
words are apparently difficult for me. Baseball's also hard for Adolis Garcia. Baseball is very difficult for Max Scherzer. He's going to have a bust in Cooperstown 5 years after he retires, so probably 6-7 years from now. But baseball's been hard for him. Baseball is hard. Baseball is difficult. Baseball's difficult for everybody. Baseball is difficult for the teams that are still playing. And as we sit here in the afternoon of Tuesday, October the 24th, there are only 3 teams still standing, and there will be 2 within about 12 hours. That's it. It's hard. It's difficult. Got it. Thank you. I learned something. Let's move on. It's hard. Get the job done.
Before we wrap it up, I've got a theory that I want to run by you, and I sort of did before we went on, but about the AL East and why the AL East was eliminated so quickly from the playoffs, and why, in fact, there was 3 wildcard teams left standing heading into the Final Four. But the AL East, I've been around the game, obviously, a long time, and every offseason, every winter meetings, there's a focus from the AL East general managers about playing in the most difficult division in baseball and having to be able to handle Fenway Park and Yankee Stadium and the short porch and the Green Monster. And even the Red Sox and Yankees build their team to win the division, to win in their ballpark. Oh, the Red Sox, we can't really sign left-handers because those right-handers that would be in the lineup are going to be playing pickleball with the wall. I don't even know what pickleball.
John Lester was terrible.
Yeah. But there's that. They build teams in that division to be the best team in that division rather than the best team in baseball. And I always refer to the Chicago Cubs, your beloved Chicago Cubs, when I was traveling there with the Expos 3 times a summer. Might be 3, might have been 4. I forget what it was. It was 3 times a summer. And you would go out there, and they had built teams in the 80s with thick-legged sluggers who couldn't run but could hit home runs and hit the ball deep and up the alleys. And to do that, they specialized the ballpark because they had day games all the time. So, that was an advantage for the home team. They knew how to get their sleep. I don't think Kikuchi could have pitched there because he needs 13 hours. So you have to be going to bed during the evening news. But they would grow the grass in the infield so that you would lose a golf ball. If you had a golf ball lying in the grass, you wouldn't be able to find it. That's how the Wrigley Field was constructed or sort of manicured to fit the team. They had Ron Say at third base. They had Ryan Sandberg, who I don't think was a Gold Glove defensive player, but ended up in the Hall of Fame because he was playing in the primary rough at Augusta. But the theory is that you need to build a team to win the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
You need to build a team that not is going to be the best in the best division in baseball, but is going to be the best in baseball. That's my theory. And the Jays need to think of that. I mean, the Cardinals, when they had artificial turf, there were 4 or 5 other teams with artificial turf. So they were building a team to win the league. And it worked out for them often enough in the 80s with a bunch of rabbits running around the bases. But the Jays can't build a team. The Yankees can't build a team. Red Sox can't build a team just to win that division. They need to build it to win baseball.
I like it. And we'll end on that note, Griff. And by the time we get together next week, we'll be 2 games into the World Series, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Well, we need your prediction and my prediction, NL or AL, since we don't know who the NL champion.
As we sit here right now, Game 7 of Phillies Diamondbacks is tonight. I am going to say that Philadelphia wins the World Series. So I think they're going to win tonight. And I think they're going to beat Texas in 6. If it's Arizona, Texas wins the World Series.
I am going to say the Phillies because the Rangers play a 6-inning game and then they go to the bullpen and they've got too many weak links in that bullpen, led by Aroldis Chapman. and led by a guy who doesn't carry himself like a closer. Jose Leclerc's stuff's been good, but he just looks like a kid. And I said earlier, a deer in the headlights. And so I love the Rangers. I love what they do, but I'm saying Phillies. And I'm saying Phillies win. I'll say if Arizona wins, they also win the World Series.
Ooh, okay. So an homage to that 01 team, bringing it back to the desert. Where Gertie and Harold, who are heading down for the winter from Calgary, are going to be sitting front row at Chase Field and having a time. Well, here's as a diehard 49ers fan, and I don't want to talk about the game in Minnesota or the game in Cleveland last week.
Good call.
I think the Phillies winning the World Series would be nice so that Philadelphia can celebrate a professional sports championship, since it won't be happening with their football team in February.
Wow. The gauntlet has been thrown down. Here we go.
Been thrown. Yeah. Making myself unpopular in Philadelphia. Brilliant idea. Another high IQ decision I've made in my life. But have a great rest of the week, Griff. And a reminder, griffsthepitch.com. All of Griff's work is there. And as he shared earlier in the podcast, there will be a World Series preview going up after we know who the National League team in the World Series will be. You can get all Exit Philosophy podcast episodes at griffsthepitch.com and go into the archives, listen to some of his great conversations with current and former Blue Jays and some of the Montreal Expos greats from the past. If you're listening to us, we'll let you know that youtube.com/Exit Philosophy is where you can get us on YouTube. The video component of these podcasts, Griff and I also went live after Game 2 of the Blue Jays wildcard series with the Minnesota Twins. We plan to do more of that on a more regular basis in the 2024 regular season. So get to youtube.com/Exit Philosophy and subscribe. And if you're looking at our ugly faces on YouTube, go get us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're back with you next Monday in the middle of the World Series and more Blue Jays offseason talk as well. Thanks, Griff. Have a great week.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, all.
Boom. We might have gone